They took vows of silence and were never heard from again. In the wet pine hills of western Arkansas, an entire convent vanished in 1974. No bodies were found, no witnesses came forward, and no records remain, at least not officially. Scattered among dusty diocesan archives and silent corners of Vatican storage, something remains today. We trace what little light still flickers through the silence of Red River Church, because some say you can still hear them praying. Grass in Red River grows too tall for the wind to flatten. It sways but never bends. The chapel came second. The sisters came first in the spring of 1951. 67 women were transported quietly and without press into a remote part of western Arkansas, escorted by 2 parish priests and a single diocesan van. Their destination, a boarded-up chapel on the banks of a forgotten river. Locals called it St. Leon's, but the name never appeared on official maps. The church called it Red River Church, and those who entered it were called the Daughters of Eternal Intercession. They were chosen from 6 different orders, strict women, mostly under 30, some novitiates, some ordained, all silent, all fasting. Each had signed a vow, not just of poverty, obedience, and chastity, but silence. Complete, unbroken silence. No speaking, no singing, no confessions except on parchment, once every 3 months. Not even their transport was spoken aloud. Only a letter from a bishop, unsigned, describing the area as spiritually arid. And the mission? One word: repentance. They were not being sent to save souls. They were being sent to suffer. And the river had waited a long time for something to devour. The town nearest Red River was 19 miles away. Fewer than 300 residents, all of them Protestant. Most had never heard of the convent being built. Most were never told. But farmers in the region had stories of the soil turning to clay in summer, of rain that came hot, of a river that had no fish, no frogs, and no echo. It was said quietly that the river remembered things, not spiritually, not supernaturally, just in the way mud remembers footprints. One farmer refused to sell his land to the church in 1949. The next day, his crops failed in a single line, like something had moved through it. He moved to Oklahoma the same year. The building the sisters arrived at had no roof, just stone walls, an iron bell tower, and a rotting floor. They didn't complain. They didn't speak by the time winter came. They had repaired the roof with salvaged lumber. By spring, they had dug a trench for water, planted a garden, and rebuilt the altar. They ate once a day, bread, root vegetables, boiled river water, and every morning at exactly 5 a.m. the bell rang. Once, there are no known photographs from the first year, but a traveling surveyor passed through the area in 1952 and sketched the convent from a distance. His notes read, "Unusual harmony, faces drawn but not unhappy, moved like clockwork, no dogs, no birds." But one sentence is circled twice. "They watched me without blinking." 3 years passed. No incident, no scandal, no complaint, just silence and work and prayer. But something wasn't right in 1954. The bishop assigned to the region received a short letter, unsigned. It read, "They are not praying anymore. They are waiting." He sent 2 deacons to investigate. They returned the same night, refusing to enter the building. One refused to speak for the rest of his life. The other later described a sensation upon approaching the chapel, like Mass had already begun, but we weren't invited. That year, 5 sisters were removed from the records. No explanation, no replacement, no memorial, just gone. From 67 to 62, the names were never reported to Rome. The logbook was updated in a different handwriting, and the bell, which once rang once each morning, began ringing twice. One before sunrise, and one at dusk. A rhythm was forming, and not one set by human hands. Sister Ruth Iloria, a postulant who had joined the Daughters from a Cincinnati order, kept a personal diary before taking her vow of silence. Her final entry, dated May 3rd, 1955, reads, The ground hums. It is not metaphor. It is not poetry. There is something in the earth, beneath our feet, watching, warm. Her name disappears from the rolls that autumn. No investigation was made. No replacement was sent. The diocesan reports from 1956 describe the convent as self-sustaining, in good standing, and unusually strict in its cloister. And yet, the surrounding trees stopped bearing fruit. Animals no longer approached the grounds, and the riverbank began to flood without rain. The people in Giles Hollow stopped speaking of the sisters altogether, not out of fear, not even out of suspicion, but because it was easier. Some things are easier, not said, and still, the sisters remained. Silent, the daughters of eternal intercession had come to bring repentance. They had come to endure, but Red River does not forget pain. It drinks it, and in 1957, the bell rang 13 times. Even though no one had touched the rope, the rest of the valley did not sleep that night, and neither did the sisters, because repentance has a cost. The trees surrounding Red River don't rot when they fall. They just sink, slowly, like something is pulling them down. Beneath the chapel lies an old slope of shale, softened by centuries of runoff. Even before the church was built, the earth was known to collapse without warning. Livestock disappeared. Wells caved in. The land had a name long before it had a parish. The Choctaw called it Iskalalusa, the ground that remembers what you do to it, in Giles Hollow. Old families still won't walk near the bend after dark, not out of superstition but memory, because before it was Red River, it was something else. The land beneath the convent had once been home to 2 native villages. Both were raised in the winter of 1823 by an unauthorized militia patrol looking for escapees from Fort Towson. They found none, but they set fire to both villages anyway. Charcoal is still found in the roots of nearby trees. Later, in the 1840s, the river became a place for frontier rituals. Not Christian, not entirely native, something in between. Half-spoken prayers were etched into the trees. Children were baptized in river water that had not yet warmed, and bodies too often were buried, standing upright. Locals said it helped them stay in place, that they wouldn't rise or wander. By the time the first missionaries arrived in 1867, there were no families left along the river, just wild tobacco and bones, and a wind that didn't come from any direction. They tried to build a chapel then, but the walls sank within a year, and the priest sent to bless the land returned without his voice, so they stopped trying. And the ground was left to sleep until 1951, when the sisters arrived and the land stirred within a week of the convent's construction. Birds stopped nesting in the trees. Nests fell from branches whole, unbroken, like they had been pushed. One morning, a sister sweeping the front step found a ring of feathers laid perfectly in a circle. No blood, no carcass, no wind, just feathers, arranged like a crown. She didn't report it. She buried them beneath the chapel floorboards. But the air grew heavier after that, sticky, warm, like rain was always coming by midsummer. It began. The river, clear by day, turned black at night. Every time it rained, the water darkened, not muddy, not polluted, just black, like oiled one. Of the older sisters, a nurse, before taking her vows, collected a jar of it. She boiled it, filtered it, and found nothing, no trace of minerals, no decay, no sediment, just black water. That wouldn't dry, she kept it sealed in a cupboard beside the sacristy. It's never been found since. The first unease came from the locals. Two brothers, Warren and Jude Milner, ran a fencing company out of Giles Hollow. They were hired to reinforce the convent's southern wall before the autumn storms. They worked for 3 days and left without payment. Their cousin, who had driven them home, later said they were white as snow, didn't speak on the way back, and refused to drive past the river again. 3 weeks later, Jude Milner was institutionalized. He wouldn't stop writing Latin phrases into the wallpaper of his mother's house. He had never studied Latin, The fence was never finished out at first. The sisters assumed it was the climate, or bad soil, or isolation. But then came the noise, subaudible at first. A low hum, always around dusk, felt more than heard, as though something beneath the ground was breathing. Not mechanical, not animal, just aware. One sister. Sister, an ice. Began refusing to enter the chapel alone. She claimed the floor gave beneath her feet, not visibly, not in wood, but in spirit. Her words. It's like the stone knows I'm there. She broke her silence once to tell the abbess, the land doesn't sleep, it's waiting. She was confined to her quarters the next morning, and she never spoke again. Over time, the crops began to fail. Rows of beans would sprout, grow 6 inches, and then stop. Leaves turned gray. Tomatoes split down the middle, even before ripening. One morning, the entire garden was found uprooted, but there were no footprints, no claw marks, no storm. Just loose soil and silence. The only thing that thrived was the ivy, thick, waxy, rooted into the outer stone. It grew even where there was no sun, even where they cut it back twice, 3 times. It returned thicker, darker. And in its shadow, the bell rope began to fray. In early November, a letter was written by a groundskeeper from a neighboring parish. He had been sent to observe the convent's repairs and report back to the bishop. His report included one sentence that was later redacted. The earth feels shallow here, like it's hiding something just beneath. He died in a fire 2 months. Later, the letter was never officially logged. No one spoke openly of what was happening. There were no exorcisms, no blessings, no pilgrimages. Just a quiet understanding that the land was not asleep. It had never slept. And now it had been disturbed. The last sign came during the feast of Saint Cecilia. The sisters had prepared a silent procession along the chapel's outer wall. As they walked, they saw ... painted in black across the stone. 4 words. IT remembers who kneels. The paint was still wet. No one had left the grounds. And the sisters had no voice to speak it aloud, but the message was clear. The land had not been converted. It had converted them. And from that day on, the river did not flow in silence. It echoed. Even when no one spoke, the bell rope never moved. But the bell still rang. Rust traced the lip of the iron. Cracks split the timber beams that held it. The whole tower leaned ever so slightly to the south, like it was listening to something underground. It was cast in 1842, salvaged from a coastal seminary, struck by lightning during a funeral mass. The inscription was melted off, but it rang clearly, and that was all they needed. The Daughters of Eternal Intercession didn't mark time by sunlight. They marked it by the bell. Once before sunrise, once before fasting, twice before punishment. Its sound was dry, thin. It didn't echo. It pressed. By the 3rd month, the rhythm had become inescapable. Wake, work, fasting, sleep, no variation, no conversation, no exception. Each sister had taken a vow of perpetual silence. Not symbolic, not monastic, absolute. Their voices were not to be heard until the end of each season, when they would be permitted to write ... once, ... on a single piece of parchment. 1 page, 1 confession. No names. The pages were burned at dawn. No one read them. That was the rule. But something wasn't right. On the evening of the 92nd day, the bell rang early. Not once, not twice, 4 times. Then again, then again. A pattern that did not belong. An invocation that had no liturgical meaning. The sisters gathered in silence outside the nave. They stood barefoot in the frost, eyes down, hands folded, waited. The abbess did not emerge. Instead, a young postulant ... the sister, Inez ... was seen carrying a folded cloth. Inside it, a length of black twine and 5 wooden tags. Each tag was carved with a name, each string cut to the length of a human jaw, handed them out, one by one. And the 5 sisters who received them walked into the chapel alone. They never returned. The next morning, their beds were made, their rosaries coiled beneath their pillows, their shoes aligned at the edge of the door, but their names were gone, removed from the assignment board, scratched out from the kitchen rolls, crossed off in the liturgical rotation. Even the written record ... the community register ... showed no trace. There was no ceremony, no eulogy, no mourning period, only silence and a bell that rang one note lower from that day on Sister Carlotta ... day. Eldest ... began sleeping with her hands clenched. Every morning, her fingernails drew small, half moons of blood into her palms. She never wrote her confession. Not that season. Not ever. Later, one of the younger sisters claimed she had seen something inside the chapel that night. Not a person, not a figure, a shape, a pressure in the air, a ripple in the candlelight. She said the shadows had changed direction and that the crucifix above the altar had its eyes open. She was sent to the infirmary, not for punishment, but for protection. She was never seen again either. The abbess insisted it was illness, fasting delirium, overwork, but some noticed that her hands had begun to shake when the bell rang, and once she covered her ears. The remaining sisters adapted, quickly, mechanically, began communicating through gestures ... unauthorized, but subtle. Eyes darted to hands, sleeves were tugged, prayers quickened at odd moments. No one acknowledged it, but it was clear they were afraid of being heard, not by one another, but by something else. There were other signs. One sister was found kneeling in the snow with her mouth sewn shut, not with needle and thread, but with ash. Her lips pressed together with blackened wax, sealed by her own hand. When they brought her inside, she wept silently and wrote only 2 words before collapsing. It listens. She did not survive the week. That winter, the bell began ringing at night. No one claimed to ring it. No one confessed. It would toll once, then stop, then toll again. Always at intervals of 17 minutes. The number has no theological meaning, but it matches the number of stairs from the chapel to the cellar. The cellar was off limits. It was locked, boarded. And no one had used it in years. One morning, the lock was found rusted through. The door slightly opened. Inside, just a ladder, and earth. Freshly disturbed. The abbess ordered it sealed again, but she gave no explanation, only told the sisters that all future punishments would be internal. The phrase was not in the rule. One sister wrote, before her seasonal confession was burned, "It doesn't want silence. It wants obedience. It wears the bell like a throat." She was among the next to disappear. By the end of the year, 20% of the sisters were gone. No excommunications, no transfers, no burials, only their belongings, and the smell of iron near the altar. A visiting priest ... sent for Lent blessings ... described the chapel as immaculate. But when he left, he refused to touch his cassock, left it behind, folded on the bench. He would not speak of it. His final note to the archdiocese read, "They are faithful, but not to Rome." The iron bell cracked in the second spring, not from age, but from heat. The tower had not burned. There was no fire, only a red haze in the air that morning, and the sound of something moving across the roof. No tracks, no entry, no footprints. Just silence. And 5 new empty beds. They stopped using the bell after that. Time ceased to be measured. Meals stopped arriving at regular hours. The chapel light was kept on constantly. Candles replaced by lanterns. The silence remained, but it was no longer chosen. It had become something else. A condition, a sentence, a weight that settled in the lungs. And still, they prayed, because prayer is the only thing that makes no sound inside the mind. And by the time the next visitor arrived, there were only 52 left. But no one would say where the others had gone, or if they had gone at all. Because to speak of them, would be to hear them. The field hadn't been plowed in years, but something had walked through it. The soil was split down the center, pressed flat by bare feet. No boots, no wheels. Just a single line of impressions that stretched from the edge of the road all the way to the convent gate. Ellis Boone was the first to see him. He had been tending the fence that bordered the old drainage culvert, no more than 30 yards from the western wall of Red River Church. It was late September, dry heat, low wind, no movement in the trees, and that's when he saw it. A figure, pale and thin, moving slowly through the tree line, wearing white robes, loose at the shoulders, long enough to drag through the dust. No hat, no bag, no shoes. At first, Ellis assumed it was a priest, though no priest had ever been assigned to Red River. No one came or went without diocesan clearance. No mass, no visitors. The chapel was sealed to the outside. Still, the man walked toward it, straight, deliberate, not as though he had found the chapel, but as though he had been there before. The strangest part, Ellis said later, was his posture. He didn't walk like he had legs under him. He glided, like his feet weren't doing the walking. They just touched ground. And when the man turned, Ellis saw his face pale, wet, eyes rolled upward, white, to the corners. Not like blindness, like reversal, and something else. Ellis swore the man's hands were clenched into fists, but his arms never moved, as though they were tied behind his back. The figure stepped through the rusted gate without a sound. The latch never clicked. The bell did not ring, but the air changed. Ellis described it as a pressure in the back of the teeth, like static without sound. He returned to his truck, locked the door, and sat there, watching. The man in white walked the perimeter of the chapel 3 times, once clockwise, once counterclockwise, and once directly down the center aisle. He did not knock. He did not wait. He disappeared into the main doorway. No one opened it. No one let him in. But the doors were wide open when he passed through. The sisters were already gathered. Rows of them, barefoot, heads bowed, lined the edges of the nave. None of them moved. None of them looked at him, even as he passed within inches, even as his robes brushed their arms. They did not acknowledge him, and for 3 full hours, he remained inside. Ellis couldn't see much from where he sat, just the open door, the flickering shadow of candles, and a low orange haze that pulsed from within. But he remembered the bell, because it started ringing the moment the figure entered the chapel, and it didn't stop. The rhythm was slow, methodical. Every 27 seconds, one single toll. Ellis timed it over and over, perfectly spaced, unbroken, for 3 hours. Then 4, then 5. By the 9th hour, the sun had gone. The field was black. The candlelight inside the chapel had burned out, but still, the bell rang. Ellis left around midnight. He had no more gas, and the sound had become unbearable. It was like a slow drilling through the ribs, into the lungs. I could feel it even when I covered my ears. He returned the next morning. The field was undisturbed. The chapel was silent. The gate locked. And the man in white was gone. No footprints, no robe, no sign that something had changed. The bell tower. Once listing south. Now leaned to the west by nearly 6 inches. The foundation had shifted, but there had been no wind, no storm. And inside the chapel, the crucifix above the altar had been taken down. Not broken, not defaced. Just removed, left on the floor, face down. None of the sisters would speak of the visitor. They were not allowed to, but one of them, Sister Mirea, had been seen later that week kneeling outside the infirmary. She had written a single sentence into the mud with her finger. He never blinked. 3 days later, she was gone. The register claimed she had transferred to Rome, but Rome had no record of her, and her belongings remained behind. Even the archdiocese offered no answers. A visiting official, a man named Father Albin, arrived weeks later to inspect the grounds. He found no structural issues, no personnel complaints, but he described the atmosphere inside the nave as suffocating with anticipation. When he left, he asked that his assignment be revoked. He never returned to Red River. Years later, in his personal journals, he wrote, "There was no man in white. There was only absence wearing form. Whatever he was expected." To this day, no record exists of any clergy visiting Red River Church in September of 1954. No sacraments were administered. No mass was held. The church disavows any knowledge of the incident. But the bell never quite stopped. For weeks afterward, locals claimed they could still hear it faintly ... on cold mornings and just before dusk. Always in sets of 9, always distant. Never answered ... and then, finally, nothing ... only silence. And the sisters moving a little slower than before, heads bowed a little deeper, hands always folded ... as though waiting, not for instruction, not for forgiveness, but for someone to return, someone who never blinked. The wood of the confessional was warped, not by time, by heat. At first glance, it looked untouched. The grain still smooth, the hinges still brass, but there was something wrong about the left side door. It didn't shut flush, and when pressed, it gave ... barely perceptible. A visiting seminarian in 1964 noticed it while dusting the chapel for Mass. He was told never to enter the booth, but the hinge had creaked as he passed, and curiosity always lingers longer in places where silence is enforced. He pressed the edge with his thumb, and the floor shifted. Not much, just enough to reveal a hidden seam in the wood beneath the seat. A false bottom drawer, hand-cut, unpainted. Inside were two things. Two small, folded pieces of paper. No envelope, no stamps, no signatures. Just names and dates. The first was labeled Thora, the second, Agneta. They had never been sent, and perhaps they never should have been written. The letter from Sister Mary Thora was brief, written in a slanted, rushed script, indented at the edges, as though she had pressed two hard ... scraping the ink into the page. It began without greeting. The dreams are not dreams. I know this now. They begin with prayer, but end with ash. She described kneeling at the altar, not in sleep, but in something just before waking. The sensation of being watched ... not from behind, but within. She claimed the air inside. The nave had changed, not its temperature, its texture. It clings, it wraps, it knows the shape of you. In the dream ... or whatever it was ... she stood in place, but her body had already left the pew. She could see herself, kneeling, mouth open, not in prayer, not in song, but as though expecting something to enter, and behind the altar, fire ... not flames, but the sound of them, crackling without smoke, illuminating nothing, and above it, a crucifix, not wood, but something wet. Her line ends abruptly, but the final words are written twice. It wears the crucifix like a wound. It wears the crucifix like a wound. The rest of the page is blank. Her name appears once more in the community register, a month after the letter's dated, then disappears. No burial, no relocation. Just gone. The second letter from Sister Agneta was longer, written in neat, methodical print, as though copied from memory. It was not addressed to anyone. She wrote of sound, not the bell, not the sisters, not even the voice of the abbess, but something beneath it all, a layer, like a second breath, too slow, too wide to belong to lungs. She said the chapel changed when no one was inside, that the walls pulsed slightly after midnight, that the shadows on the eastern wall bent in unnatural angles. Despite a single light source. And that the hymns they wrote were being rewritten. One passage notes, I found the verse altered again today. Line 4 replaced with a phrase, I do not know. Language unclear. Not Latin, not Aramaic. I do not recall anyone rewriting it. She began keeping a journal of the changes, but every time she reviewed her notes, the ink had faded in the margins. She wrote, "I believe the nave feeds on repetition." She stopped sleeping in her assigned cell. She moved to the laundry room and only entered the chapel during daylight. Even then, she wrote of a presence. One line repeats 3 times. "It knew what I would say before I thought it. It knew. It knew." She began hiding her written prayers, burning them before dawn, instead of placing them with the others. The final section of her letter reads like confession. "We should not have come here. I think we brought nothing with us, but something here spoke first. We assumed silence was protection, but it only made us easier to hear." And again, at the bottom of the page, "It wears the crucifix like a wound. No further." Letters were found. The drawer had not been opened since the 1950s. Dust had collected in the corners, and the edges were sealed with a thin layer of wax. It was not meant to be found. The church does not officially acknowledge the documents. The seminary file where the pages were stored is now sealed, and the visiting seminarian who discovered them left the priesthood in 1966. In his final written statement, he describes the letters as too precise to be delusion, too personal to be fabrication. They thought they were whispering into the void, but something whispered back. No evidence exists that either Sister Mary Thora or Sister Agneta ever left the grounds, and their rooms remain locked to this day. 1 candle in each, still replaced by hand, still lit. Still burning, but never worn. And in the chapel, the crucifix that once hung above the altar now rests in storage. A faint indentation remains on the wall, not of the wood, but of a shape behind it, pressed outward, like something was trying to come through. There are no more letters, no more names. But one sister. Still living, now confined to a Carmelite home. Was asked, decades later, if she remembered Thora or Agneta. She paused. And said, "Yes." And then, softer. Barely audible, but not all at once. And she never spoke again. The tree line bends slightly toward the chapel, not from wind, but as if pulled. Just past the eastern ridge, a logging crew from Marion County had set up winter quarters. Rough cabins, propane stoves, a narrow track road cleared only, far enough for a single vehicle to pass. It was January 18th, 1961. Sky white, ground harder than bone. Nothing moved unless it had to. At 4:17 a.m., according to their foreman's log, the crew was woken by a sound, not thunder, not wind. Screaming. Not a single scream, but a mass of them. A swell of sound. High, fractured, toneless, not human, not quite animal. One man described it as a crowd of people being turned inside out. It lasted 3 minutes, then silence, but not the clean kind. The kind that replaces sound, like something had been ripped away. 4 men. Ellis Boone. Among them. Walked toward the source. They crossed the tree line just after dawn. Snow lay in a fine crust, pitted by shallow divots, each one no larger than a thumbprint, as if the air itself had been shaking. Then they saw it. The belfry. It stood against the pale. Sky. Crooked and dark. But alive with movement. Not birds, not branches. Pages. Hundreds of them. Whipping, spiraling, rising. Then drifting down like ash. Thin parchment, yellowed at the edges. Stamped in red ink. They lifted one. Psalm 6 in Latin. Lines etched in fading iron gall. Margins burned black. Another. Psalm 3:8. Another. 109. Dies laudam ni taqueris. O God, do not remain silent. None of them matched. None of them complete. And none of them were blank on the back, because each had been reused. In faint, tight. CURSIVE. Ink. Barely visible. Were written lines of personal confession. Phrases no priest should read. Lines no confessor had spoken. I woke with a mouth full of salt. I saw the altar breathe. It wears my voice now, please stop praying. It feeds on what we mean. They gathered what they could. Over 40 pages, some frozen to the trees, some pressed into the snow like fallen leaves. They brought them to the parish office in Giles Hollow, and later to the archdiocese. But they were told the same thing. There had been a storm, a wind tunnel from the hills. The convent had suffered structural damage to the steeple. The bell tower had opened. Loose papers, old hymnals, and lectionaries had escaped. There was no record of screaming, and no one had been harmed. But something wasn't right. The wind that morning had come from the west, and the chapel windows all faced north. More than that, The belfry had been sealed since 1959, padlocked from within, stone mortared, never used again after the bell cracked. It should not have been able to open. And the papers? They matched no ink kept at the convent, and none of the handwriting matched. 1. Archdiocesan Archivist, Anonymous, wrote the following in a private memo. These are not transcriptions. These are responses. Something was answering the Psalms. Midline, mid-breath. Sister Rosaria, then infirm Arian, was asked privately if the papers belonged to them. She shook her head and mouthed the word, never. But her hands were burned. Faint circular marks on both palms, as if she had tried to hold something that didn't want to be held. The pages were ordered, destroyed, but a few were not. Ellis Boone kept 3, folded them between 2 pages of his family Bible. He would wake years later, gasping, hands bleeding, saying the same phrase every time. It sang to me without air. He was institutionalized in 1973, diagnosed with psychogenic fugue. He stopped speaking entirely 3 years later and died without ceremony. No funeral. No remains released out of the other loggers. 2 left the state. 1 vanished in 1965 during a hunting trip near Giles Hollow. Only his boots were found, laces tied, standing upright, near the river. The convent never acknowledged the event. That winter, the sisters were seen burning their hymnals, page by page. No firewood, no prayers, just pages. And wind, a cold that never touched the trees, and that smell of salt, of parchment, of something older than language. The following Easter, a new crucifix was installed, heavier, stone-backed, bolted into the altar wall. When asked why, the abbess said, "The wind took too much last time." She died a month later. Her mouth was open, but her lungs were full of paper. Thin, dry, unwritten. And to this day, the belfry door remains nailed shut. But if you walk beneath it during a hard winter, some say you can still hear a chorus. Not singing, not screaming, but answering something. Not calling out to God, but responding to something that already heard. The chapel door was bolted shut from the inside, nailed twice, sealed once with wax. A red sash hung from the iron handle, unmoving. Even in wind. It was August of 1967, and for the first time in its history, Red River Church was sealed by direct order of the Vatican. The rite was called Communion Continua, a 14-day consecration, bread only, water forbiddens, no speech, no exits. It was approved quietly, no records held locally, no photographs, but there was a letter from a priest named Adrian Marcello, dated July 2nd, addressed only to the apostolic signatura. In it, he wrote, "They are not breaking, but they are softening. Something presses from within, like breath behind glass." He called it the rising rot. Not literal decay, but a slow deformation of faith, of silence, of meaning itself. So the rite was sanctioned, an act of sanctified resistance, meant to purge doubt and seal the walls of intention. On the first day, a priest arrived, but did not stay. He administered the host to each of the 43 remaining sisters, then turned, then left. The doors were sealed. The sash was hung. The bell rang once. For the first 5 days, everything remained quiet. Locals noted faint light through The upper windows, a warm smell like frankincense. An ash dot by day 6, reports shift. The light had gone red, not from fire, but a deep tint, as if the air itself had darkened. Dot. No sounds came from the building, but the ground around it had begun to crack. Hairline fractures along the steps, as though something beneath had pushed upward. Day 7, the river dropped 2 feet. No rain, no drought, just absence, and the birds ... already sparse stopped flying near the steeple. By day 10, the priest returned. He stood outside the doors, spoke no words, and placed a chalice at the threshold. Inside, nothing. No wine, no wine, no note. But the metal had been etched, a single line circled 3 times. In Latin, corpus non invenitur. The body is not found. Day 11, the bell rang twice, unprompted. No wind. Then again, then again, then again. 7 times total, each ring distorted, a second behind the toll. As though echo preceded the sound. Day 12, the bell stopped. No tolls, no movement, no light. Silence so deep, a passerby claimed it made their teeth hurt, like pressure in bone. One man ... visiting from NT SELAH ... said he heard a breathing sound from under the chapel eaves. He described it as the sound a lung might make ... if it had no ribs. Inside, no sister emerged, no candlelight moved. Number. Shadows passed behind the windows. Day 13 came and went. No sound, no bell, no movement. But the river turned black, not muddy, not polluted. Black like shade, like something in it had died, but never decayed. And on the 14th day, at 3:03 a.m., the bell rang. Once, then again, 13 tolls, each exactly 6 seconds apart. Perfect rhythm, perfect stillness between. Witnesses gathered from the road, 33 of them. They reported seeing a light bloom from the steeple cross. It expanded. Outward, not upward. White, silent, thick as milk. Then ... gone. No sound, no wind, no echo. The bell never rang again. When the church was unsealed 3 days later, what they found was silence. No bodies, no sisters, no blood. Just robes, folded perfectly, each one placed in the same pew the sister had once occupied. No host, no wine, no chalices. But inside the tabernacle, a note. We consumed what was offered. It offered us each other. The altar cloth was gone. And beneath it ... where once there had been wood, there was now stone, not laid, not cut. Formed. One solid mass, veined like flesh, smooth, cold. It could not be broken, not by pick, not by saw, not by torch. It remains today. Part of the foundation, never mapped, never moved. And inside the wall of the vestry, someone had etched a number. Not carved, not scratched. Drawn in what appeared to be bone ash. 13, the number of tolls. The number of pages later found in the priest's journal. Each one blank, except the final. The Eucharist ... did not dissolve. It replicated. I could feel it, still in my mouth. Even now, he was buried without ceremony. Closed casket, hands bound, tongue removed. At the church's request. No rites followed. No successor sent. To this day, the bell remains silent. The tower still leans 5 degrees south, and on the anniversary of the rite, those who pass by claim they see something in the window. Not a person, not a shape, but the outline of kneeling. Waiting. As if communion was not consumed, but begun. The frost had broken 2 days earlier. Mud still clung to the roots. Mist hung low in the chest-high grass beyond the gravel path, but near the gates of Red River, the air was wrong. It felt full, as if something had moved through, but not yet cleared. March 1st, 1974. Father Albin arrived just before morning light. He was sent by the diocese. Routine review, a 3-year interval, check on the grounds, assess inventory, confirm presence. No cause for concern. He parked outside the wrought iron gate. Not rusted, still oiled, still padlocked. The chain hung. Too perfectly. No tug marks. No pull on the latch. But the lock was open. Not broken. Not cut. UNFASTENED. As if it had never been secured. He entered alone. No sound from the trees, not even birds. Even the river. Less than 50 yards west. Was quiet. The walk up to the chapel took 7 minutes. He noted this later in his report. He described the air as warm. Too warm. Like stepping into a room where candles had been burning all night. The chapel doors were shut. Not barred, just closed. He called out once. No reply. He opened the doors, and everything was in place. The pews were dusted. The altar cloth was fresh. The host dish rested atop the tabernacle. Still empty, but clean. Every candle stood straight. New wicks, unused. And on the back wall, where the bell rope had once hung, a length of white cord now dangled. Still, dry, untouched. He moved through the sanctuary. Footsteps soft on wood that should have creaked, but didn't. The sacristy held nothing unusual. Chalices, vestments, all folded, all labeled. But the air was humming, not loud, just a vibration, like breath caught in a throat. He descended to the dormitory next. 60-7 rooms, each identical. And each bed. Made, sheets tucked, pillows aligned, folded habits at the foot, and atop each, a single rosary, not worn, laid. Placed with such precision that he began counting paces between them. Each one matched, but something wasn't right. There were no signs of life, no clothes in the drawers, no shoes by the doors, no wash basins with water. He moved faster now, room by room. Same beds, same rosaries, same silence. He opened the cellar. Access. It led nowhere. Just stone walls. No storage. No pantry. No food. The dining hall was set, but not for eating. The tables were cleared. Chairs stacked. No utensils. No crumbs. But in the center of each table, a psalter. Latin. Old binding. Each open to a different psalm. But they weren't. BOOKMARKED. They were CREACED, as if someone had turned to them again and again, worn at the corners. Edges curled. And all of them ended on the same line. Psalm 77, verse 20. Thou leddest thy people like a flock by the hand of Moses and Aaron. He closed one. The hum grew louder. He described it in his second report as not audible, but internal. As though my body heard what my ears could not. There were no footprints, not even his own. He stopped and checked, looked behind him. Mud on his boots. Still caked, untouched on the floor. No marks, no dust. Nothing moved. He called again. Nothing answered, but something resonated. A tone, low, wordless, like the echo of a chant long after the choir had left. He checked the chapel. One final time. The tabernacle was still closed. The host still absent, but the air got warmer now, and the cross above the altar was upside down, not hung that way. Turned. The hook still intact, the chain still looped, but the crucifix reversed. Deliberate. And behind it, the wall showed no sign of stress, no damage. As though it had always been that way. He stepped outside. The sun had not moved, but his watch read 4:12 p.m. He had arrived at 6:30. M. He had no memory of time passing. No hunger, no thirst. Only the feeling that something had closed behind him. He returned the next day with 4 men from the parish. The gate was locked. This time, truly padlocked, welded shut. The chapel doors chained. No light inside, no air. And when they broke the chain, they found dust, deep, untouched. Beds no longer made, no rosaries, no psalters. Just An empty building. The floors beneath the pews. Warped, as if pressed from below. And in the air, that same tone, fainter now, less harmonic, but there, like breath under floorboards. They left by sundown. The church filed the incident as administrative miscommunication. No press release, no internal memo. Father Barrick left the order. 2 months later, he would say only one thing to a visiting journalist in 1977. They didn't walk out. They didn't leave. They changed mediums. When asked what that meant, he smiled, but never answered. And in 1980, his house burned. No accelerant, no source. But the only thing that survived. Was a single rosary, still laid out, still warm. Still humming. The dust settled faster at Red River, not from wind, but as if the building itself had grown tired of being seen. By summer of 1974, no one entered the chapel, not priests, not workers, not even animals. The front gate was welded shut. A metal sign appeared overnight. Contaminated grounds, keep out, Diocese of Covington. No parish bulletin ever mentioned it. No obituary for the missing sisters. No final mass. Just silence. Sealed. 2 weeks later, a single page appeared in the diocesan register, folded, unsigned, due to confirmed presence of mycotoxins in the ventilation system. Red River Church is to remain closed pending environmental remediation. All personnel are reassigned. No contact permitted. No records of mold samples. No CDC involvement. No cleanup crew dispatched. But a tarp was drawn across the chute. Windows, plastic, industrial, held down with crucifix nails. And in the months that followed, archival references to Red River began to vanish. Psalter logs, land titles, donation ledgers, all erased. The church's name was struck from the diocesan directory, and in a 1976 press release, the Bishop of Lexington claimed the sisters were relocated to a contemplative order in Santa Fe. But Santa Fe denied any such transfer, and not one of the 67 women was ever seen again. What happened next took longer to surface. In 1993, a retired archivist. Gerald Wexley agreed to speak under anonymity. He had worked in the Vatican's Sacred Congregation for Religious during the 1970s. He described a folder, red, cloth-bound. Stamped, not for indexing. Inside, a letter, dated March 18, 1974, sent from Covington to the Holy See. It read, "There is no longer an inside, only the held. They are not in rebellion, they are in accord." The host began answering back. There was no reply. But 2 months later, Vatican funds were wired to a realty firm in Louisville. The property was purchased by a shell company. Deeds transferred, insurance dissolved. And that summer, an order was issued by the Apostolic Nuncio in Washington. Do not engage with Red River Church. Its light is to remain covered. Wexley's voice trembled when he recalled the final document. It was a memo, brief, typed. It said, "Faith is not what failed, containment is." The error was not in silence. The error was in letting it localize. He said there were internal debates. Some believed the sisters had experienced a mass psychogenic fugue. Others suspected unknown contaminants, spores, heavy metals, neurological drift. But a third theory, rarely written, only spoken, suggested something else. They sanctified too hard, too long, too purely. That the communion unlocked something. That prayer, in saturation, distills meaning until meaning itself fractures. And what remains can think and answer. The files were ordered destroyed, but Wexley kept one page, folded between hymnals. He showed it to no one, but described it, a single sentence, handwritten in red ink, underlined twice. It does not want followers. It wants context. He died in 2001, collapsed in the middle of midnight mass. Witnesses say his last words were, "We never closed the circuit." Today, Red River Church is still standing, but Google Maps blurs the area. No listing, no name, only an empty lot marked private grounds. The original rosary count ledger was erased from diocesan inventory, but one line survives, ... transcribed from an earlier catechism journal. Rosaries cleaned, 67, one for each sister. Yet, in 1989, during a survey of regional soil contamination, a team uncovered 68 rosary beads in the chapel foundation. Only beads, no chains, no crucifix, each identical in make. But one was chipped. As if it had been bitten. When investigators returned 3 days later, the beads were gone. No prints, no trace, but where they had been. The concrete had blistered. Like something had pressed up from underneath. A former groundskeeper. Name withheld. Once claimed he heard chanting through the bricks. Not words, but vowels. Held too long. As if sound itself were being rewritten. He left the church 2 months later. Burned his cassock. He said he couldn't stop dreaming of a mouth without a body that chewed in rhythm. And smiled in silence. In the official archives, Red River does not exist. The Vatican will not comment, but a memo was leaked in 2019, marked confidential. Unsigned. It read, "There is no contamination, only contact. Red River did not spread. It transferred." And beneath, written in a different hand, ... shaky, but deliberate, "Light should never be poured, only broken." To this day, no formal burial has been held. No rites, no censer swoon, no light left on, because Red River Church was not closed. It was veiled, and those who remember it remember too clearly the heat, the hum, the sound of prayer, folding inward. As if it were never meant to rise, but return. The ivy wraps tight around the bell tower now, so thick it has split the brick in places. The church doesn't appear until you're nearly on top of it. Shadowed by trees that grow too straight, too silent. There is no signage, no path, no sound of birds, only a low canopy of green, and beneath it, a roof that sags like a chest. That's been holding its breath too long. Urban explorers call it a thin place, where boundaries decay, where sound moves slower. They go in pairs, some in masks, some with infrared. Some leave markers so they know which way they came. Most say the same thing. It wasn't empty. They describe a stillness that vibrates, a dryness in the air that feels humid, and windows. Not broken, but smudged. Handprints, clear outlines. As if someone inside had leaned forward, but no fingerprints, no oils, no blood. Just dust pushed outward. One group left a camera near the side chapel. When they reviewed the footage, it had recorded exactly 13 minutes, then stopped. Battery full, card intact, but the lens FOGGED. And in the audio, a hum. Faint, rhythmic. One explorer described it as breathing, but slowed. As if the entire building exhaled once every minute. They called it the floor effect, because beneath the chapel. The floorboards rise. Only slightly, barely visible, but consistent, and when walked upon, they shift after the foot lifts. Like something follows. Beneath. The pews are skeletal now, collapsed inward, mold blackened, too brittle to sit, but the altar remains. Stone, chipped but untouched, and nailed into the center, between the grain lines, a crucifix, upside down, rusted into the stone, a hole at the center. No one's sure how deep it goes. One explorer dropped a pebble, never heard it land. Others have found rosary chains tangled in the tree roots outside, half buried, cold to the touch but never rusted. One chain was reported to hum, only at night. And only when held by someone raised Catholic. Another incident involved a woman from Ohio, not religious, not raised in the church. She entered on a dare. 15 minutes in, she fainted. When her friends brought her outside, she kept repeating one phrase. The host reversed itself. She had never heard that term before. And later, When asked what she meant, she said she didn't remember saying it at all, but her palm had a pressure mark, 5 small circles, almost like beads, pressed into the flesh. She said it burned for 2 days. Then faded. One local boy. A mechanic from Carlisle. Claims he spent the night in the chapel. He left at dawn. No injuries, no story, but wouldn't speak for 6 months. When he finally did, he said this: "There's still something inside. It's not watching, it's listening." He never went back, but his dog went missing the next week. Found 2 miles away, curled at the chapel gate. Alive, but deaf, both ears ruptured. No sign of trauma. No sound that loud had been reported in the area. And yet, a neighbor claimed to hear chanting. At 3:12 a.m. Soft, layered, not a choir, more like dozens of voices breathing vowels, overlapping, repeating. As if speaking only to fill silence. A sound engineer who visited in 2017 recorded 20 minutes of ambient noise inside the nave. When filtered, he discovered fragments, not words, but syllables, carried at frequencies between human hearing thresholds. In Latin, phrases like Domini non sum dignus, miserere nobis, and once, at the very end, barely audible, we held too low. No one knows who said it, but the tone was female, a whisper, drawn out. And looped. As if it was trying to remember itself. The diocese refuses comment. Officially, the church was raised in 1976, but satellite images show a structure, overgrown, largely intact. The roof collapsed in places, but the bell tower still upright. And beneath it, the floorboards still visible, still moving. Every spring, local teens report seeing pale lights near the windows. No electricity, no wiring. But flickers, soft and white, like candles cupped in a hand. One group left offerings: bread, water, a folded cloth. When they returned, only the cloth remained, but wet. With no sign of rain. Today, most locals avoid the area. Property records still listed as active, but no one collects mail. No phone line. And beneath the mailbox, a rosary pinned into the ground, each bead separated, each one facing downward. As if trying to be buried, but the soil won't take it. They say it always returns to the surface. No matter how deep it's placed. And if you hold it, if you really listen. You might hear a single breath, not yours, rising from below. Still. Rhythmic. Waiting. The air thickens before the gate, not with heat, but weight, like something pressed downward, slowly, as if it's still waiting for permission to rise. Red River doesn't echo. It absorbs. Every voice that's spoken too loud near the bell tower fades. Even the birds fly wider arcs now. Even the rain slows as it crosses over the roof. Time doesn't pass the same here. It repeats. In cycles, like prayer beads worn down to a rhythm. Some say the sisters never left, not in body, but in vow, that when the gates were sealed. There, silence didn't break. It deepened. That beneath the chapel. In the dirt, the wood, the stone, something still KNEELS. Not in hope, but in obedience. A prayer that never ended, not chanted, not sung, just held. Like pressure, inward, circular. The binding silence of 67 women, never broken, never disobeyed, and never released. One former seminarian claims he heard it. In 2009, he stood near the back wall during dusk, didn't enter, didn't touch the gate, but said he felt something in his chest. A pulse, not his own. He described it as liturgical, not musical, not vocal, but paced. Like the space between breaths. Being remembered. He wept, without knowing why. And when he turned to leave, he swore the ivy at the gate had moved, not downward, but apart. As if something beneath was watching him go. He left the church the next year. The logs of early Mass at Red River contain a strange omission. The sisters stopped writing names after 1959. Instead, every entry simply says, "We offer what? We are," over and over. Same phrase, same handwriting, no signature, but in the margins ... subtle indentations. Not ink, pressure dot as if someone had been writing beneath the paper. Softer, longer. A, different hand dot, and one entry ... dated August 8th, 1965 ... contains a sentence not seen before or after. It took the shape of obedience, and that was enough. Who ... or what ... it referred to was never clarified. When the floorboards were last examined in 1981, a single Latin phrase was discovered carved beneath the choir stalls. Small, almost accidental. It read, "Fiat perpetua, let it be perpetual." 3 words, but no tool marks, no signs of recent entry. The wood around it was warped, as if heat had been applied. But the day was cold, the chapel unlit. A visiting theologian from Florence suggested something chilling, that the sisters had not vanished, but finished, that Red River was not a place of abandonment, but of completion, a closed loop of faith, not broken by death, not ended by silence, but sealed, a living prayer, bound not by liturgy ... but by intent. And if that's true, then Red River is still praying, not for guidance, not for peace, but for separation, because what was asked of them ... they gave, and what answered remains. It doesn't want more prayers, that it doesn't want more sisters, that it wants distance, boundary. A, perimeter. Witnesses say the wind around Red River doesn't cross the gate, it turns. REDIRECTS. As if repelled by the building's breath. Protection, not warning. Just containment. Some have reported hearing whispers, not from the chapel, but the trees. The roots. Words they don't understand, but recognize, phrases heard in dreams. In fever. One hiker claimed he heard his own mother's voice, reciting a psalm she never knew. Another, a lapsed nun, fell to her knees at the gate, crying, mouthing the rosary. But when asked later, she said she hadn't prayed in years. She said it just needed someone to hold the line. She never returned and never spoke of it again. The chapel walls still stand, but each year they lean further inward, like they're listening, like they've learned the shape of something not meant. For air. The ivy grows thicker, faster. It doesn't bloom. It coats. A second skin. A closing hand. Some have tried to cut it back. It grows back. By morning. One botanist recorded its pattern. 12 spirals. Always 12. Like a clock without hands. Telling time not forward, but inward. And at the center. The belfry. Silent. Chained. But some say the chain doesn't hold. The bell. It holds the prayer. Wrapped. Anchored. Bound so tightly that even memory can't uncoil it. But it still hums. At night. On feast days. When no one is listening. And when the wind is still. The floor breathes. Soft. Steady. Like lungs. That forgot to die. Because the vow never ended. Because the prayer never ceased. Because silence, once made sacred, doesn't dissolve. It waits. Not to be broken, but to be recognized. Red River does not call to us. It warns. And all it asks is that we stay out. What if prayer, when uttered in fear and hunger, in silence, does, end single quotes, reach heaven, but something beneath it? Message. Religious silence is not always sacred, and isolation, when mixed with faith, may open more than the heart.